I've been all over the map.
Don't turn that station, because we're going to have a really great show, and you're going to find out about the final word on state employee pension reform. Why hasn't anything happened? When will it happen? What will happen? Look, it's $100 billion, underfunding or more. More importantly, your jobs, the economy, your entire life, really your marriage, all depend in some form or another on state employee pension reform. So don't say that's too complicated for you. Maybe you want to find out about, the crime, the 19 shootings, 20 shootings that happen each Friday night or something, and what can be done. Maybe you want to find out about, some of the social issues, what the Republican candidates are running on. Oh no, if you turn that dial, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show. Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. As I said, we're going to have a great show this evening. And we can do this a little unusual. Let's see if we can get the camera right on him. Our guest tonight is?
Tom Morrison.
State Rep Tom Morrison. He's been there for 3 years, okay? Actually, he's just starting his 3rd year. But the thing of it is, and a lot of people don't realize this, State Rep Tom Morrison is leading a revolution in state employee pension reform, right?
Yeah, it would be a bold move forward.
You and Representative Jeannie Ives, who's been here, and Senator Jim Oberweis.
Correct, yeah.
And the Illinois Policy Institute.
Uh-huh.
You guys are all in cahoots. You'd all like to.
And teachers too, who start to hear about my plan, and
the teachers like it?
Some do when they find out what it actually does. Yeah.
All right.
So we can talk about that.
So, as I said, we're going to talk about that. It's not just some esoteric topic, okay? State employee pension reform is really key because it relates to really the economy. If you're a major firm and you're thinking of moving here and you hear there's $100 billion underfunding,
plus $100 billion plus.
Plus, somebody's going to figure, well, one, that's not too good. It has instability in the economy. Somebody's going to have to raise taxes to deal with it.
Money has to come from somewhere.
It's going to come from maybe people moving in because the others have already left.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, State Representative Tom Morrison, what should be done about the underfunding and the inadequacy and the improprieties of the state employee pension plan?
Well, one thing we know is that the state has proven that it cannot run defined benefit pension plans very well. Few entities can, whether we're talking about one of the 50 states, whether we're talking about big private companies, many entities that used to have defined benefit plans, or where the retiree was given a guaranteed amount every year until death, and in many cases even to spouses, for many years beyond that. They've proven that they can't operate it very well. There's too many variables, too many unknowns. It's very easy to make promises today that don't have to be fulfilled for 20 or 30 or 40 years from now.
Okay. So that's what they've done. The politicians have screwed it up. Republicans and Democrats for the last, 30 or 40 years. They don't fund it properly. Also, I would say, and I think this is supported by studies by the Illinois Policy Institute, the benefits are too high. There are people who say, like Ralph Mortieri, Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, he said, oh no, the benefits aren't too high. This is all a matter of the government just screwing up. Would you say that government employees on average in the state of Illinois get pension benefits that are in excess of what the private sector pays? Would you say their total salaries, let me withdraw that simpler question. Would you say the total compensation for state employees on average exceeds that of their counterparts in the private sector when you count their salary, their pensions, their benefits, and so forth?
Yeah, I think that the data backs that up.
Okay.
That there's generally anywhere from a 10 to 20%, in some cases more. Depends upon the position, it depends upon the education level, the actual job.
So the benefits are out of whack. then the politicians have have not funded it regularly as they should have. They've had ridiculous things like cost of living adjustments that aren't cost of living adjustments. Tell people about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because the biggest thing is not actually the salaries. The salary is a component, but the biggest problem is that if you consider it a problem, but individuals are living a lot longer. And so you brought up the cost of living adjustment. Right now, retirees are promised 3% compounded adjustment annually.
So even though it says cost of living, it's not, because the cost of living sometimes in recent years, we've had zero
remains
inflation.
Stagnant or
we've had 1%, 1.5%. So if it's cost of living, it would mean their COLA should have been zero that year, or it should have been 1% when it was 1%. But no, it was zero cost, zero inflation, and they got a 3% increase.
Right, it compounds.
And it compounds, meaning next year, the 3%, if it was 3% again, wasn't just on their base salary,
right,
but it was on their base salary, which started plus the 3% increase.
So this is how this works out. If an individual is retiring when they're in their 50s or in their early 60s, and that individual lives for 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years into retirement, then their employee contributions, their employer contributions don't anywhere near add up to what has been promised to be paid out well into retirement, and then to the spouses too.
Where does all this money come from? Because people say, "Oh, it doesn't. Don't worry, it's the government." Okay, it's just the state government. It's the state government, so we don't have to worry about it, Tom. You and I don't.
Yeah,
your neighbors don't.
The government is you and I.
Oh, so this is the way. So when your income is taxed at 3%, so for instance, in the olden days, when you were earning, maybe a couple had $50,000 each, so you had roughly $100,000 in income. Well, remember back a few years ago, your income tax rate was 3%. So roughly 3% of 100,000, you'd be paying $3,000. Mm-hmm. But then the Democrats, and this was completely passed by the Democrats. I'm not being partisan.
Passed about 10 hours before I got sworn in.
Before you got it, they raised the income tax rate from 3% to 5%. So people who earned that ghastly sum of $100,000, oh, you were filthy rich. If you earned $100,000, you're filthy rich. And so Pat Quinn would say, Pat, come on, defend us. He would say, oh, you should pay more. Okay, you should pay more. And what if you earned each $100,000 or $125,000, and then you had $250,000? He said, oh, you're way too rich. Your money, that's not your money, it's our money, right? The government's. So the point is, if you had been paying $3,000 in taxes at a $100,000 salary, you're now paying 5%, $5,000 in taxes.
Right.
If you had $200,000 and you were paying $6,000, 3% of 200 would be $6,000, right? Mm-hmm. And then you went up to $10,000, okay? And that doesn't count your property taxes, which goes to mainly schools,
right? Yeah.
Or other county issues. Doesn't count your sales taxes. Doesn't count your taxes on dividends or capital gains or whatnot. Doesn't count, of course, their federal taxes.
Right.
Oh no, this is all for the joy of supporting a bunch of legislators who've grown accustomed. Tom, you have to realize this. I mean, it's not to you, but really, wouldn't you say the legislators have grown accustomed to a nice lifestyle?
It's not an easy job. It's not for everybody, but it needs to be more.
Well, if your name is Speaker Mike Madigan.
Well,
if your name is Speaker Mike Madigan, let me just interrupt you.
Yeah.
Now he only makes like probably a speaker $80,000 or $90,000. Because he makes a little bit more because he's speaker, because he's probably chairman of the committees and so forth. But what does he make if he's like at a major firm that does real estate tax assessments, and people know if they come to him, somehow their assessments won't go up as much? It's kind of magical, right? And so what do you think the speaker makes in roughly each year from his law firm?
I would
just
have
give me a
no
wild
idea.
guess.
I'm not going to guess. I have no idea.
It probably is $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, something like that.
I don't know.
I mean, what would people? It's a relatively small law firm, and people pay a lot to get their tax assessments down. So I'm just saying. I know we got away from the pension, but no, but it's really related, because you want to say these pensions, okay, that people get, they never really were negotiated in good faith, because the people who were negotiating them were like this, the politicians essentially, or the state employees under the politicians, who had the unions there, and they wanted to please the public sector unions. Mm-hmm. So it's not like FMC or Ford or Microsoft negotiating with its employees.
Right.
These guys, they didn't really care. Because if you're the CEO of Microsoft and you screwed up in the negotiation, you may not be CEO next year.
Right.
If you're Chris Radonio, for instance, we don't want to pick on Chris, but she's never here, so yeah, I guess we will. So if you're the Senate Republican leader named Chris Radonio, you're never evaluated on performance. Never. Okay? Because Chris came in, what wasn't it, like 32, 27, something? The Republicans were down, but just slightly. And now it's 40-19. That's a terrible performance, isn't it?
It doesn't bode well for the taxpayers because there is uneven, it's an uneven playing field. You have everything you said about the union bosses is accurate. But back to pensions, back to what I bring to the table as a legislator. This is what I told my district. I will vote for a meaningful pension solution. And part of it was, part of my bill was House Bill 3303. What it would do is it would preserve what workers have earned up to today, whatever credits they've earned in the pensions plans to today, they would be guaranteed that. Starting tomorrow and for the rest of their career, however long that happens to last, 2 years or 30 years or 40 years, they are going to pay into a 401k. And so upon retirement age, reaching retirement age, it would be like getting a hybrid payout. They would get what they've been promised up to the effective date, but then moving forward, it would be a lot like the private sector. And this is what when I was running my business, I ran a cleaning business. Anytime we had to do something very difficult or we had to ask the employees to do something very hard, we did it first. We took the first hit, we set the example, and so I did not take a legislator pension.
Right now,
opted out.
You opted out. You have not. And 2 years you've been here. You've not. You're not accruing pension benefits. You're telling me for the first 2 years you've been there.
Right now,
you're declining the pension.
Yeah, and that's a permanent opt out. You once you're out, you cannot get back in.
How many legislators do you know? There are how many? We've got 59 senators. We have
118.
So
reps.
that's 177. Total state legislators. Of the 177 state legislators, how many would you say are doing what you are opting out?
Over 20.
20? Well,
yeah, over 20.
That's good. People didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Right.
Do they tend to be more Republican or Democratic, or is it split?
The first year it was all Republican. I think there are a handful of Democrats.
Would it be Senate President John Culberson?
It would not be. No, it would not be Senate President.
He's got so much money, John. Why wouldn't you do it? Come here and defend yourself. John used to come on the show, but now he says not so much. But would it be Speaker Mike Madigan? Would he be one?
It wouldn't be him either, no.
He's got so much money.
Yeah.
Why don't these guys do it? Do they think they really need that additional funding?
I don't know. I don't want to get into that. I'm just saying that legislators ought to be on a more equal playing field with the taxpayers who have elected them. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
So that extends to the federal level, because as we're taping the show on September 30th, people are saying we're facing a shutdown of government. And it's because those big bad Republicans want to do terrible things. Like one of the things they say, Obamacare should apply to the federal bureaucrats as well as the legislators who are currently exempt. Seems only fair. If you have a federal law, it should apply to everybody.
To everybody
including
equally.
The people who passed the law.
Including congressmen and senators. I totally agree.
But President Obama says that's a nasty thing. They can't be in the law, and the senators, the U.S. Senate, run by the Democrats, essentially, they took it out and sent it back to the House without that. And also, those delays of Obamacare that President Obama has voluntarily recommended because this was not ready for prime time yet. So, the Republicans want some other delays. Mainly, I guess, we've delayed it for corporations, but we haven't delayed it for individuals. So they would like to delay it for individuals for 1 year. Obama says, no, let's shut down the government. If we could have that, see, the Republicans are causing the shutdown. They've passed a bill, continuing resolution, but it has the 1 year delay. And Obama says, they're causing the shutdown. So tomorrow morning, when all of the major media like ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, PBS, TTW all speak to you as if this was caused by the Republicans, you can ask them and say, not really, because if Obama had reasonably negotiated this, he wants to negotiate with Iran, but he won't negotiate with the Republicans in the State House.
I mean in Congress, U.S.
I mean,
Congress.
yeah, not in the U.S.
Yeah.
Congress. And
But back
in the
to
US House,
state
yes.
politics.
Okay, so back to state politics.
Yeah.
But you see, there is a relationship, because you were just saying you want the pensions. You're saying you're going to set the example and saying you're declining this. You don't really
Right.
need this, and it should
And
start.
because
the
I
reform
think-
starts there. So I'm saying the analogy is sort of
So-
like trying to be even-handed on the federal level.
So
as well.
part of my legislator salary goes into a self-managed plan. I don't get a match from the state,
Okay.
but this bill that I
You
propose.
put your money in yourself, and you know it's there, so you're building your own pension plan that nobody else could screw with.
Right.
Which is one reason why John Tillman, CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute, and the Illinois Policy Institute back your plan, because they want something that's not a defined benefit, defined contribution. Individuals must put in a certain percentage. The
Right.
state must put in a certain percentage, and then the individuals manage it, right?
Yes, that's right. And
Within
so this-
bounds, just like 401ks are managed. You can't go and start investing in pork bellies, but you can invest in diversified
Right.
portfolio stocks and bonds.
and as a-
And the politicians can't touch it.
No, that's
They
right.
can't get their hands on it. They can't screw it up.
That's right. And so let me tell you about some conversations I've had. Because initially when I came out with this, there was a lot of opposition because either people didn't understand what it did or they were only listening to what the union bosses were telling them in Springfield. But as this has dragged on, as this crisis, and it is a crisis, it's a crisis for the taxpayers, it's a crisis for the participants in the pension plan who have no certainty that we're going to be able to resolve this. I mean, those who are older right now or who are currently retired, they're probably going to be okay. But anyone who's younger or in their middle age years is in deep, deep trouble. Look at the city of Detroit, for example. I mean, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but look at Detroit.
The polls would say these
and-
younger people believe it's more likely they'll see Martians in their backyard tomorrow than they will see a reliable pension plan when it comes time for them to retire.
That's correct. And so that's why we need to do something bold, give them the power to manage their own money. Every single paycheck, they would get funds put in their self-managed account. So what a teacher told me recently, he's been teaching for 27 years. He said, Morrison, I heard about your plan, and initially I was against it, but as this has dragged on, all of a sudden I realized my entire retirement nest egg is in Springfield. And I do not trust the legislators.
So he
I
would
don't
prefer-
trust
he
you.
would prefer
So
your
your
plan at this
bill,
point.
your
If he
bill
could go
would
back
be-
and do it that way, where his money would have been under his control, not under the politicians,
Right.
he would do it.
He could have invested in just an index fund, very, very low fees, because that's one complaint about 401ks.
But what do we do now? So you're supporting your bill, much as you believe in it. Jeannie Ives believes in it.
Right.
Jim Oberweis believes in it. Senator Oberweis, John Tillman, Illinois Policy Institute, maybe others.
And now a smattering of teachers and
It's not
public
smattering-
workers.
It's, still-
who-
it's not going to get called by Senate President Cullerton. It's
No.
not going to get called by Speaker Madigan. Those are the two Democrats who rule this General Assembly. If they say we're not going to call it, you don't even get a chance to see what legislators
I
want to
couldn't
vote
get
for.
it out of committee.
Couldn't
That
get it
is
out of
true.
committee.
Right.
So in the meantime, being a practical guy, what is it you're supporting for state employee pension reform?
Well, there were two major pension proposals in the spring. One was called the Madigan bill. That was Senate Bill 1. The other one was the Cullerton bill, Senate Bill 2404. The unions had a lot to do with the latter bill, 2404. I did vote for Senate Bill 1, the Madigan bill, with the caveat that it is a first step.
Right.
Because, and Representative Ives and I and Representative McSweeney also spoke on the floor, Representative Kay, all of us wanted to make sure we got into the record that this is a first step, because it is not a solution. No, it just it
saying
delays
2 or
the
3
day of
years, they'll be
reckoning by
back.
2 or 3 years. That's exactly right.
Does it cut? What does it do? Can you give us the specifics?
Well, it's kind of
in
moot.
broad strokes, what does it do to bring about reform? Does it cut benefits?
Which one? Senate Bill 1?
Yeah, the Madigan bill.
It would have increased the retirement age slightly, on a sliding scale.
Okay.
Would have increased the employee contributions just ever so slightly.
Okay.
The 3% cost of living adjustment would have been more closely tied to the actual
Cost of living.
the CPI.
So it changes what's now statutory 3% no matter what,
Right.
to something approximating the actual increase in cost of living.
Correct,
That's
right.
that's
Yeah.
a major improvement, right?
Right, and I think it's important for your.
Also, does it allow compounding or not?
No, that's where there would have been one adjustment.
There would be, so it would remove compounding?
Well,
It's hard to say.
it's hard to say. It's kind of off the
Okay.
table now because this conference committee is trying to negotiate between those
Well,
two
before we get
bills.
to that, we still have about 10 minutes left. So that's the House bill, that's the Madigan bill, and you supported that. Then there was a
Yeah,
Senate
but
bill,
reluctantly. I
understand.
reluctantly supported it
because you had to choose between one.
because I don't think it goes far enough. It's
You
still
would prefer your proposal, but that's
Yeah.
not going to get called.
Right.
And if you're choosing between the Madigan bill and the Cullerton bill, you clearly prefer the Madigan bill, right?
if I had to choose. Yeah, I mean that was the choice we were given. at
It's
the
like
end of the night.
libertarians sometimes when you say, if you had to choose between a Democrat and a Republican, what would you choose? And they tell me they would choose suicide. Okay, it's somewhat analogous.
Well-
Okay, but you wouldn't choose suicide here. Okay, but the Senate bill does less in terms of adjustments. Does it adjust the COLA the way we've talked about? Does it make the COLA the cost of living as opposed to 3%? Does it do that?
That was one
Madigan-
component.
the Cullerton bill,
Right.
we'll call that.
I don't remember the exact detail.
I think it does less. It saves
Yeah.
a lot less.
Right.
It does less on the retirement age, less on the employee contribution going up. In general, Senate President Cullerton's view would be less is more, right? Less
Well-
reduction, fewer benefits. It means more for the Democratic Party because it alienates the public sector unions less, and you get more contributions in. And if you get more contributions in, you get more Democrats keeping their Senate seats, and then John Cullerton stays president. So see how that works? Less is more. Less for you, more for John.
Yeah. Well,
Is that would you
here's-
go along with that? Less for the citizens, less for the taxpayers, more for Senate President Cullerton.
The problem is for
And John,
the
if we got it
participants-
wrong, come on and defend the show. We haven't seen you in the last 4 or 5 years. We know you're busy, but
Yeah.
I mean, State Rep Tom Morrison can come.
The problem is for the workers themselves, that there is no real guarantee for them because we have a constitution that guarantees that pensions cannot be diminished. But remember, all these changes we talked about
It
were
does
added,
say that. It does
they
say
were added
that.
legislatively. They were
But
added legislatively.
there are constitutional lawyers who say it doesn't mean you can't reduce benefits in the future.
Going forward, yeah.
So the Madigan proposal, they say be constitutional. Suddenly, I don't know if we have it here. See, this is the U.S. Constitution, but if we have the state ones, suddenly John Cullerton has become a strict constructionist. Really? Strict constructionist. I never knew John because he's quite liberal. Like, have you ever talked to him about abortion? Couldn't find it in here, but he says, yeah, there's a constitutional right for a woman to have an abortion. Strict constructionist. Well, no, not so much on abortion, just on when you want to reduce the benefits to public sector unions, then John's a strict constructionist.
Well, here's what I want your viewers to look up. Go to website howmoneywalks.com. Howmoneywalks.com. It's very user-friendly.
How money walks out of the state?
Yeah, it's
How
using
jobs walk out of the state?
well money. It uses IRS tax data for the last decade, showing on a state-by-state basis and a county-by-county basis where money is flowing, and it does not bode well for Illinois if we keep down the same path.
Okay, but so we got on pensions. It's an important issue. We've spent most of the show. We weren't going to do that, but we have.
It's an important
But
issue.
to tie it up, so as of September 30th, the leaders, Cullerton and Madigan, were butting heads. And on this, they couldn't resolve it, apparently, or some would say they don't want to. So even though they couldn't resolve it, they couldn't reach agreement, they each essentially appointed with the Republican leaders people to the pension committee. There are 10 people appointed, and somehow that committee is supposed to resolve what Cullerton and Madigan can't. As of today, do you think they will resolve it?
I think
pension committee?
there will be a bill, and it'll be some weak compromise.
Something
weak's
between
my adjective.
Madigan,
Yeah,
so it would
right.
be less strong, less beneficial to the state than even the Madigan bill.
Right, and less beneficial to the workers long term.
And less
because
beneficial to the residents.
These
the workers,
younger
the economy.
teachers, those in their 20s, 30s, early 40s, they're still going to be
you're
in
not
trouble.
sanguine, you're not hopeful. Basically, you're saying this does not solve it, and I guess you as a Republican would say if you want to solve this problem, you would say people are going to have to elect more Republicans to the State House and the Senate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Because in the State House, it's 71-47, 71 Democrats, 47. That would be the contribution of, what's that guy's name who's running for treasurer now in the Republican Party?
Tom Cross?
Yeah, Tom never came on the show because Tom was too busy. As the State House leader who wants to now be treasurer, he was too busy What was the margin of the Republicans when Tom came in? They were down. They didn't have the majority, but were they down 71 to 47?
I don't know.
You do know.
No, I don't know.
You think it was worse than 71-47?
Oh, no, it wasn't worse. I don't have the exact
So
number.
Tom, who's been there like a decade, I think, his contribution is to make it worse. Really, that's his contribution. So
Let's talk.
now
Yeah.
Jim Durkin's there, and we're going to say, Jim, you're going to be evaluated. But using this really low bar that the Republicans have, can you do any worse? Can you do any worse than Tom Cross has? Because if you don't, you're in. Right?
Well, remember that the map making process is.
But partly they lost the map because they couldn't elect a Republican governor. And shouldn't
Right.
Tom Cross be partly responsible? Isn't that partly his job as a state house leader to go out and elect a Republican governor? Isn't it?
Well,
Isn't it?
No, the responsibility.
Who gets the
isn't-
blame? Bill Brady, all on his own. Rodonio and Cross walk away, and all Republican leaders walk away. And the fact that Bill Brady lost for governor, it's all his fault.
But we've got to just.
Shouldn't the state GOP? No, you have to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I really have to differ with you, Representative Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
You have to hold people accountable. You cannot do this la-di-da stuff about, oh, let's move on, let's all be friends.
Yeah. No, we're not la-di-da. Not in any stretch.
But don't you have to hold Cross accountable for his failure? Don't you have to hold Rodonio?
In the governor's race,
Okay, let's go quickly to the governor's race. Who are you supporting there?
I am not going to probably not going to endorse anybody.
Really?
No.
So not Bruce Rauner.
So everybody's going to be a contender.
Not Kirk Dillard, not Bill Brady, not Dan Rutherford. Those are the four candidates for governor in the Republican
They're
primary.
all going to contend. Each one has assets that are going to help them.
And you can't
it's gonna be a horse
can't
race.
see enough of a difference to say, I'm going to put my neck out and support somebody.
I'm as a
Don't
conservative.
you think your people look to you for some moral leadership, some guidance?
Well, if on an issue-by-issue basis, there are certain
I mean,
things
you went
like
to
about
Hillsdale
each candidate.
College, okay? Really, that's a good school.
Sure.
You learned how to make judgments. Shouldn't people benefit from that? I mean, give us your best shot. You're pro-life, right?
Yes.
Bruce Rauner, he's pro-choice, right?
Yeah.
Well, some people say his wife's pro-choice, he's really pro-life. That's what Jack Roser would say. But then Jack couldn't come on the show because he said the people in his office told him he shouldn't do this show. That would be moral leadership. Jack, it's so sad that at 90 years old you can't make your own choices. And we say that out of respect for you, Jack. Change your mind. Show some stuff, okay? Be the Jack we used to know. Come on, public affairs. Tell us about Bruce Rauner and why you're supporting him. Because you think he's pro-life? Do you think Jack got that right? Is Rauner really pro-life?
I wouldn't know. I don't know that we can ascertain that from his statements. So, but
Does it matter?
he's saying the right thing on pensions.
What about Rutherford?
There's a
Is Rutherford using the state treasurer's office as a bully pulpit? That's what he said 4 years ago. He became state treasurer. He'd use it as. Has he gone out and talked about state employee pension reform? Dan Rutherford.
No, I haven't heard him talking about that. And
So he broke that promise. He's not used it as a bully. Dan, come on and defend yourself. We're hammering you. We're going to hammer you. Hammer. So you got then Dillard and Brady left, two guys, okay? They're both pro-life. They're both strong on employee pension reform, state employee pension reform. They're both good on not raising taxes, would you say?
Yeah,
Brady,
for
Rutherford?
sure.
So is
those
it a
two.
toss-up between Rutherford and Brady?
It's early. I'm going to
So
disappoint you.
you might come out and endorse?
I'm going to disappoint you, Jeff. Not on this show.
Here, hold that ball, okay? Hold that ball. I mean, it gets firm as you hold it, okay? People look for some leadership.
Yeah. Well, it's
You
early.
don't, you're just going to straddle the fence? I mean, seriously?
in a gubernatorial primary. Yeah.
Yeah.
At this point, we're early on.
So last time around, you didn't support anybody in 2010 either?
Well, I voted for someone, but
No, but
I
in the
didn't-
primary, did you support anybody?
I was running my own race
Okay.
for governor. Yeah. I mean, in last time there was a.
Who you supported
gubernatorial
for
race.
president in 2016? Ted Cruz?
I like Ted Cruz.
Would you
him a
support
lot.
him, you think?
Well, I mean, it's early.
If you had to choose now, would you support Ted Cruz?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know enough about him to support him for president. But for what I've seen so far, I like him. Yeah, I mean, that's what Illinois needs is the same.